Hey everyone, this is Erin from AaronsAudioCorner.com, and today I'm going to review the Neumi BS5 Bookshelf Speaker. I ordered the speaker off Amazon a few weeks ago. I paid $90 for the pair. I went to the manufacturer's website, I clicked on the link for their manual, and I was actually impressed by what I saw. I felt like that they had some true engineering go into the design of this speaker rather than it just being made somewhere with a bunch of parts thrown together and slapped in a box and shipped out the door. I felt like they actually had a target audience in mind and that this thing was probably going to do well for its price. But you don't know until you actually buy the product and you test it. And that's what I try to do. I always try to objectively test something, and then I also listen to it as well to see how those correlate and see where any deficiencies are. And overall, I'm really quite impressed with the speaker. It's a weird situation for me to be in because when I listen to speakers, I usually either like them or I don't, or I hate them or I really like them. Most of the time, I'm kind of in that middle zone. And for me to find something exceptional, it really has to be terrible, like the Yamaha S807, or it has to be exceptionally well performing. Now, this speaker, it's not exceptionally well performing, but it isn't bad. It does a lot of things really well, but it doesn't do anything perfectly, and it doesn't do anything terribly. When you consider the price of $90 for the pair, for me, I think this is a great speaker for an entry hi-fi person on a lower end budget. Or, if you need a pair of desktop speakers, something like that, to put on your computer speaker setup, then you could do that as well. I don't think that I would use these for a high-end home theater, and I imagine that most people shopping are probably not expecting a $90 pair of bookshelf speakers to be, a high-end home theater type speaker or a high-end hi-fi type speaker. But surprisingly, this speaker performs really well, and I couldn't quit listening to it. And I know that that sounds kind of crazy, and I don't want people to think, oh, he's just saying that to sell speakers, because heads up, I am going to link my Amazon affiliate link in here, because I do encourage you, if you've got 90 bucks to spare and you're looking to get into this, buy these speakers. But I'm not saying all that stuff to get you to buy them. I genuinely just like the speakers. They're impressive. Now, sitting in my listening room, I'm about 11 feet away from the speakers, and when I got to about 90 dB or so, I could hear issues that I didn't like, distortion, compression, stuff like that. But I kind of expected that, knowing that the price is what it is. If I'm hovering around the 85 dB mark, these speakers are really good performers. So let me get into some of my subjective notes that I'll back up later with my objective. When I listen to these speakers, I listen with my ear placed between the tweeter and the woofer, and that's actually exactly what Neumi says to do in their manual. However, Neumi doesn't tell you how to align the speaker horizontally, either on axis or 15 or 30 degrees off axis. They do have a diagram in their manual that shows the speaker being flat against a wall, or not flat against a wall, but parallel with a wall. And they do say to have the speaker be placed at least 6 inches from a wall. So they don't want you to put it right on top of a wall. What I did was I emailed Neumi and I asked them a couple questions. Number one, how should these speakers be aimed? Should they be aimed on axis or off axis? And if off axis, what angle? Also, the grills, do you prefer that those be, or I should say, were these speakers designed to be listened to with the grills on or off? Now, I assumed off, and that was the case. That's what they said. As far as aiming goes, they said that they're designed to be listened somewhat off axis, but you can toe them in if you want to. And I found that listening to them on axis actually sounded better. The reason for that is, even when they were on axis, the treble to me was about 1 to 2 dB down in level, maybe even 1 to 3 dB down in level, depending on what frequency I'm referencing to the mid range. And towing them off axis just brought that level in tweeter or high frequency response down to where I did not like it. So I would recommend that you listen to these on axis. And since I just mentioned the grill, let me show you that. This is grill cloth stretched over what appears to be MDF frame, and it is magnetic. Just pop it on. It's actually kind of hard to get off. Magnets are really cool. I like magnets. The speaker incorporates a 1-inch silk dome tweeter, and it's kind of recessed into I don't really call it like a full waveguide, but it's waveguide-esque. That's also to help disperse the sound in a wider sound field. The woofer is a 5-inch, I believe it's a fiberglass cone, with rubber surround. Yay, rubber surround. Then you've got two plastic ports that are right here. When I spin this around, oh, and this also looks like it's all just kind of veneered. Spin this around, you can see the back with the little banana plug housing, plug your speakers into. So, not a lot physically going on here, just a very basic bookshelf speaker. And then everybody likes to hear the knock test. I'm knocking on it. Nobody's answering, so I don't know what to do about that. Oh, another thing, it's actually really, really lightweight. I mean, hey, gravity, Newton. One thing I like to do is to look at the manufacturer's specs and see through my objective analysis how far off they are, if they're being truthful or if there's some wiggle room there or something like that. So let's look at first off what Neumi states the frequency response is. 50 hertz to 20 kilohertz, and they say typical in room. The typical in room is because room adds some gain to the speaker, especially on the low end, especially if you place the speaker near a wall or another boundary. When I tested the speaker, my frequency response plus or minus 3 dB range was about, I think it's 64 hertz to 20 kilohertz if I ignore the strong narrow dip at about 800 hertz. So overall, I think, yeah, I'd agree with this. Nominal impedance, 6 ohms. That's mostly true. The tweeter itself actually is a 4 ohm tweeter, and you can see that in my data. But below about, I can't remember now, I'm just going to say 3000 hertz. I'll have to verify this in the data. Where the tweeter is not playing, so below that range, the impedance is about 6 ohm throughout. What that means is most AVRs, at least these days, will probably be fine driving a 6 ohm load. But I can't guarantee that. So you'll want to make sure. My AVR had no problem driving that. I'm also using an AdCom. A friend was nice enough to donate to the cause, and it's a 2-channel AdCom, and it had no problem at all driving these speakers. So it worked fine on a separate amplifier, and it worked fine on my older Denon, which I think is an AVR X4000, just for what it's worth. Sensitivity 86 dB at 1 watt, 1 meter. So I test at 2.83 volts. And depending on the nominal impedance, that's going to be a little bit lower or higher than what the 1 watt measurement is. I measured it at about 84 dB at 2.83 volts, 1 meter. And that's kind of low, honestly. But being a smaller speaker like this, okay, it all goes back to you're not going to be jamming on these anyway. You will need to provide decent power if you're going to be listening far away. Power handling 15 to 100 watts per channel. Okay, I have no idea. I don't keep like a meter. I don't clamp a meter on my speaker outputs and my amplifiers to know how much power I'm putting into a speaker. All I really care about is what it sounds like in the far field and how loud can I get it, because I've got plenty of amplifier to not create any distortion going into the speaker, especially if I use my crown amplifiers. Those things are like 600 or 700 or 800 watts per channel at 8 ohms, so nothing to worry about there. The diminishing point, or the holding off point, was never the power put into the speaker. It was always the speaker's ability to take that power and use it properly. This all ties back into the listening volume at a certain distance. My max at about 11.5 feet was 90 dB. That's going to be your limiting factor too. So as long as you've got 100 watts or so, you're going to be more than okay. Dimensions and weight. Okay. Crossover. Okay. Yeah. So I feel like on the front, they're being honest. I feel like this is a truthful marketing package. No pun intended, because this is the box, right? And now that we're done looking at the box, let's flip over to the objective portion of this analysis. Here I am at my website's review page. This is erinsaudiocorner.com. If you click loudspeakers and go to the Neumi BS5 Bookshelf Speaker review, take you there. And this is the intro on why I bought the speaker. Now here's some of Neumi's, I guess, marketing information about the speaker and all that stuff. You can read that later. They say a crossover point of 2.1 kilohertz, 50 hertz tuning on the front ports. Those are important things to note. More specs, picture of the manual, grill on, grill off. Now this is the speaker. So I gutted the speaker, took the speaker, the actual drive units out. Here is the dome tweeter. This reminds me of a Peerless tweeter. I don't know that it is, but that's what it reminds me of. It's a stamped steel basket, regular ferrite motor, nothing crazy here, probably very inexpensive drive units themselves. The cabinet is 1/2 inch thick MDF. Here is a crossover, and the box they state is a 12 dB slope, second order crossover. Well, 12 dB slope is the same thing. So second order crossover is what they're touting here. More pictures, and now we get into the objective data. And I'm going to try to run through this one a little bit more quickly than I normally do because I don't want to spend 20 minutes on this, and I'm sure you don't want me to. Main takeaway in this graphic is this is the impedance at two different drive levels, 0.1 volts, which is normal for everybody else to do, 2.83 volts, which is what I choose to do because that's how the sensitivity is also measured. The minimum load is 4.6 ohm, and you see that above. I said in the commentary that it was 3K, but it's above that. So it's around, what, 6, 7K. That's high enough in frequency where there's not a lot of actual power going to it. So a standard AVR should be able to drive this speaker at its nominal load of about 6 ohm, but you will need to make sure that your AVR can handle that first. My AVR, my Denon X4000, had no issue doing that, and the external amplifier that I also use for my listening tests, no issue doing that as well. This is the on-axis frequency response overlaid with the impedance, and what I do that for is normally so you can kind of see if there's any blips in the impedance, do they also show up in the frequency response. These are small enough that it's hard to say for sure, but it does look like the 300 hertz and around 400 hertz line up with some detriment here in the frequency response. Not 100% sure there. I said that the tuning frequency of the enclosure is approximately 50 hertz, and that actually jives with Neumi spec. And we're going to keep going. This is where I had my back and forth with Neumi about aiming the speaker, and I decided that the best position for aiming was directly on axis, 0 degrees at the speaker, and between the tweeter and the mid-woofer in vertical location. This graphic is the frequency response on axis, and I calculate the mean SPL at about 84 dB from 300 hertz to 3 kilohertz, and it is surprisingly, it's actually mostly plus or minus 1.5 dB, so it's within the gray window that you see here for the most part. Now there are some areas. Number one, this 800 hertz or so dip that I mentioned earlier, this is caused by the ports. Same thing for this about 1600 hertz. This is also caused by the ports, and I'll get to how I know that in a little bit. And above about 6K, 5K or so, the response takes kind of a dip. Now this is what I heard when I was listening, was the response was low relative to around, well, this is 5K. So relative to around 5K. And then you can also see some resonances here. Now, this speaker is actually wrought with resonances, but they seem low enough in level that they're not incredibly problematic. You will hear them with the right music, but they're not so high in level that they just stand out to you as ear piercing like some other resonances would. So it's a subdued resonance, but it's a resonance nonetheless. Now you'll also notice too that there is this bump that I mentioned around 100 hertz. That's the medium Q bump, and that gives it that little bit of a punchy sound to it, but it doesn't have a lot of grunt because the F3, so it's 3 dB down point, is 64 hertz, which is right around the region of most kick drums. Still, 3 dB down is not terrible, but what you do know, and you should already know just by looking at the speaker, its size alone, is that it's not going to have a lot of output down low. So you are absolutely going to need a subwoofer for this speaker if you want to use it in that kind of, full range fashion. And let's keep going. These are all the horizontal measurements from 0 to 90 degrees. I always measure 0 to 180 degrees, but I don't fill this chart up with all of the other measurements. So this is just 0 to 90 degrees. In general, what you see is this strong dip at about 800, again, caused by port resonance. 1600 again, I believe, due to port resonance. And let's see, some of these other resonances, these are caused by the mid-woofer breakup, I believe, and I'll look at the near-field measurement data to determine if that's 100% accurate or not. But this isn't the worst frequency response I've ever seen. This isn't the best. It's a $90 speaker. I'd actually say it's pretty good. Above 10K though is what stinks, because then your response starts becoming a lot more directive. This is normalized. I'm going to skip through some of this stuff. And this is the spectrogram that a lot of people are used to seeing. What this shows you is how wide the response window is at certain levels. So if you follow the red and the dark, so the dark red is about 87 dB, the lighter red is about 84 dB. So let's just say that we're going to stay within this 84 dB window. We're looking at we'll start on the other end. So this speaker is essentially omnidirectional until about the 1 to 2 kHz region. And this is mainly due to the port resonance, and then there's some other breakup things in here too that's causing some far off axis nonlinearity. And when you get to about 2K, we're going to stop. We're going to say that's kind of the breaking point. So I'm going to say 150 degrees plus or minus. This line lines up with 150 degrees, and then it actually stays pretty good until about 4 to 5K. And then about 5 or 6K, it starts to become more directional as the tweeter is, playing basically on its own at this point. And then above 10K, it becomes a lot more directional. And I believe this too also is the dip from the on-axis response that you see relative from the dome tweeter center to the waveguide of the dome tweeter. And we're going to keep going. This is the vertical response, and the vertical response window actually looks pretty good as well. I mean, I'm legitimately surprised. I just wish that there was a way that they could extend the response above 10K to be a little bit wider. Personally, I would like that for myself. Now, some people may not care for a wide, high frequency response. Some people say they can't hear that high. I can. That's why I would like it. This is the global polar plot. This is actually the exact same data that we just looked at. This is the horizontal polar plot. It's the same data that we looked at up in, let's see, this graphic, except instead of being squished down into a rectangle, I've backed it out into a 360 degree view, because to me this is a little bit more intuitive. So again, if you just kind of want to follow the red, you can see that you're about, I'm going to say 70 degrees, plus or minus 70 degrees, up into about 13 kilohertz. And then that's where, above that, that's where this becomes more directional. So you've only got a window of about 20, 25 degrees where this speaker behaves basically the same. And that also lines up with the normalized data as well. So the normalized is just taking the on-axis and comparing every other axis of measurement against that. Not a lot of people get a lot of use out of this. I find it's a good quick check. I prefer this graphic more because this kind of gives you an idea of how the speaker is behaving. And this being the front of the speaker, this being the back of the speaker, plus or minus 90 or to the side of the speaker. Now we're going to look at the vertical polar plot. And again, I'm about minus 20 until I see kind of breaks in here, and about, what is that, plus 40. So it's a pretty wide window of response. It's not bad. And if you normalize it, it's not a minus 10 to about positive 20 or so. So really, it's not half bad. This is the Spinorama curve. This is a collection of various curves. One, the black is the on-axis response. You've already seen that. The green is the listening window response curve, which is an average of plus or minus 30 degrees horizontally and plus or minus 10 degrees vertically. You really want this to mimic the on-axis response, and for the most part, this does a pretty decent job of it. Anywhere that it doesn't would be an indication of a very, very strong resonance, a very poor directivity matching between a tweeter and a mid-woofer, or a mid-range and a mid-woofer, or something along those lines. The early reflections blue curve is what you kind of expect in the room as far as reflections go, and any bumps in that or dips in that are indications of resonance. So you can see that there's a peaking around 4 to 5 kHz, and I believe that's probably due from the cone breakup of the midwoofer, but I'll have to scroll down further and verify. The other thing that I like to look at here is the early reflections directivity index, which is this blue dashed line. I've mentioned this before, some of you probably already know this by now, but if a speaker is radiating in 360 degrees in every direction the same way, that is called omnidirectional. And an omnidirectional speaker would have a blue dashed line that would be flat across 0 all the way through. What that means is there's no change in directivity. It's always radiating the same amount of energy in every single direction. It's not shooting, a specific frequency at, dead on axis, or it's not, a narrow frequency bandwidth or a narrow frequency. Let me back this up. A narrow window of response if in front of the speaker. To help make this make a little bit more sense, let's just follow through. So you're omnidirectional until, I'm going to just ballpark it at 200 hertz, and then you start to become a little bit more directional, the woofer does, and then there's this dip. So this means that you're wide again, but not by a lot, and then you jump up. So really what you should have seen is this line should have just trended right through here, but this dip brings you down in directivity, so it means that it's not looking forward as much as it is all around. But now above 1K, you're starting to get more focus toward the front of the speaker, and then you've got a dip again due to another port resonance. You're still increasing in directivity, and then around here is where your tweeter has really started to take over. They say the crossover point is 2.1 kilohertz. There's some overlap there. There's also some breakups going on with the woofer, and that's causing your directivity to be quite sharp here. But as the woofer starts to subside and the tweeter really is just taking over on its own, the directivity decreases, so the response radiation pattern has gotten wider through here, and it's still pretty wide, and then above about maybe 9K, it starts to increase again, which is expected for a dome tweeter in a rather shallow waveguide in this case. And this is the early reflection curve breakout. I encourage you to go to my website and read what all of these things are if you have the time. This is a predicted in-room response, and I will get to that again shortly. Distortion levels for this speaker make sense. On the low end, it shoots up like a bottle rocket. The mid-range in this area, I heard this distortion when I was listening to prominently male vocals. Let's go to the next thing, compression. So compression is when you are putting 3 dB into a speaker, but you're only getting 1 or 2 dB out. You're not getting out what you put in because there's something that's limiting the speaker's output. Typically it's heat in the voice coil or something like that. So this speaker, just in general, I would say like half a dB is okay for very, very high output compression. And when I say very, very high output, I mean like, I don't know, above 100 dB at 12 feet or something like that, just kind of give you an idea. So the red line indicates that you have about 1.25 dB of compression. So you're losing 1.25 dB of output at about 98 dB. And that's no bueno. But if you were to cross the speaker and relieve the woofer from having to create this sound and match the speaker up with a subwoofer, the compression wouldn't be as bad. You still have some, but it wouldn't be as noticeable as it was to me when I was listening. So just another case for having to use a subwoofer. Extra measurements, I measured both of the pair of speakers, and then I compared the difference between their frequency responses. You're in about, plus or minus 1 dB between the two. So a decent match for a $90 pair of bookshelf speakers. I can't ask too much more than that, I don't suppose. This is grill on versus grill off. In a nutshell, listen with the grill off. Moving on. Cabinet test. I didn't hear or see anything notable from the cabinet as far as colorations go. This is the black is the on-axis response, and then the red line is the near-field measurement of the woofer. Blue and teal are the left and right ports, and then the yellow is the tweeter near field. So the reason you want to do a near field is to identify any resonances. And what I mean by that is if we look at the ports, see this strong peak around 800 hertz? That's out of phase with the woofer's response, and that causes you to get cancellation. So that's why there's a strong dip. Very, very narrow, but a strong dip nonetheless. Here, same thing with the port around 1600 hertz, strong dip there. And then you'll also notice the woofer shows some breakup right around the 900 hertz region, and maybe the same thing here, although that may be getting colored by this port breakup or the port resonance as well. And going on, so the woofer, there's another breakup of the woofer at around 5K, which is what you see here. So like I say, this speaker's got a bunch of little resonances like that. They're low enough in amplitude where they're not very high in response, but they're still there nonetheless, and with the right music, you'll come across it every now and again. And then I plugged the port. Red is with the ports plugged. I literally took my socks off and stuffed them. So if I ever sell these speakers, I hope nobody knows that I put socks in them. I'm just going to say that. Black is the standard frequency response on axis, so it's what you've seen numerous times before. What you'll notice here, a couple things. Number one, when I stuff the ports, I'll lose some low end response, and it's about maybe 2 dB difference between the two curves. But really what I picked up with, I got rid of that null caused by the port resonance here at 800 and then around 1600 hertz as well. So that's why I say if you wanted to put this speaker up against a wall, you could do that. Just stuff the ports, get rid of these nulls, and when you lose that 2 dB, but also place the speaker against the wall, you add 6 dB. So 6 dB minus 2 dB, the delta is 4 dB gain on the lower end. So I think that would actually work out pretty well for these speakers. And then here's all my notes, what I measured, and I'm going to run down here and skip to the subjective analysis portion real fast and try to knock that out. So I measured the response in my room at the listening position in a 1 cubic foot volume, and then I also measured across the entire front row using the moving microphone method. And what you see here is the predicted in-room response that is generated from all of the earlier curves from Spinorama data actually lines up really well with what I measured in the room. So again, this is another pro, I guess, for saying that measurements absolutely do matter. And if I can predict what the response is going to do in my room for just looking at a single predicted in-room response curve, that's pretty awesome. Below about 1K, I've got my speakers, my home theater speakers are located right behind the speakers that I was demoing, and that causes some issues. And then below about 300 hertz, the room takes over. So if these speakers have been placed away from my home theater speakers, this discrepancy here between about 300 hertz to 1K wouldn't be there. This predicted in-room response curve would actually match up, and yes, I have verified that. And let's see here. I found maximum SPL was about 90 to 92 dB. I'd say 90 dB. I had reached a brick wall, even though the woofers were not mechanically falling apart. So there was no mechanical popping, or the speakers didn't, say, oh my gosh, I just started losing output due to compression. I thought the tweeter was a bit too low, but I heard some sizzle, and I'm thinking that sizzle may be the resonance around 5K, which is interesting. I felt room ambience was lacking, and when I go back and look at the data and I see that the response starts to get a lot more narrow above 10K, I can almost without question guarantee that's why. I mean, the room ambience was lacking is due to the lack of that air above 10K hertz and the less interaction between the speaker and the room. So, and then I think I went through a lot of this stuff. Again, the mid-range distortion, and I also tried towing the speaker 10 degrees to 30 degrees off axis as well. And now let me switch back to seeing me. So my final conclusion is I have no problem recommending this speaker. If you're in the market for a budget audiophile type setup, you're not going to be listening crazy loud, and or you're going to be near field. Another thing to consider too is if you want to seal these ports off, place the speaker against a wall. Sealing the ports will decrease the bass by about 2 dB. If you look at my notes or my objective measurements, you can see that. But placing it against a wall lifts the response by about 60 dB. So you'll get a net effect of about a 4 dB, a net effect of about 4 dB gain on the lower end if you want to stuff the ports and place them near a wall for like computer speakers or something along those lines. Man, I can't talk today. And I want to make it clear too that I feel like I'm maybe overhyping these speakers, and I'm trying not to do that. It's just that I'm really excited by, the performance of the speaker for the cost. So it's really, it truly is to me a great value speaker. A chunk of my enthusiasm also has to do with my interaction with Neumi. So I order these speakers, I pay for them myself. I wasn't provided these speakers by the company or anybody like that. I ordered them directly from Amazon myself with my own money and from donations from my viewership. I emailed Neumi to ask them about the aiming. They replied back, what to do with it. And then I said, hey, by the way, the reason I'm asking all these questions is because I want to make sure I'm testing these in the manner that you designed them to be listened to. they replied back, said, great, you know, send us the link when you're done. So I did that, and their reply after that was actually really receptive. I was really impressed by, they were thankful that I reviewed them and gave them a shot, and they appreciated the time that I took. You don't always know what to get when you're dealing with the manufacturer after the fact. You know, sometimes they may say, well, you did something wrong, or they become accusatory. And Neumi wasn't like that at all. In fact, I worked out a pretty good, you know, email chat with them, and I asked them, hey, would you be willing to donate a pair of speakers to my followers on my Facebook group page? And by the way, if you want to join that group page, you can see the link at the bottom somewhere in my comments or something like that. You'll find that link there. Join that, because that's kind of how I keep people up to date with what I'm doing. And also every once in a while, I may be able to do a giveaway like this. They said, sure, you know, just start that up, tell us who won, give us their address, and we'll take care of the rest. So I did that, and they're going to take care of it. And I thought, man, that they don't have to do that. That was really cool. So Neumi as a company, to me, just strikes me as a company that cares, a company that's actually trying to make a good product. And I don't know, I get good vibes from them in general. I told them in an email, and I'll tell you guys as well, I would be interested in seeing what they can come up with at a different price tier, maybe like the $200 or $300 range, because I feel like for what you're getting for $90 out of this speaker, I think they could do some really good things with a $300 speaker. So hopefully they stick with it. They have good success with this speaker, which I feel like they truly will, and maybe they'll go to the next step. And going back to me saying that I bought this pair of speakers, so I am going to link these speakers in my comment section. They're already linked on my website's review. And if you want to buy them directly through my Amazon affiliate link, that would be great. That'll give me like 2%. So 2% on $90 is about $1.80. So yeah, if you bought them through my Amazon affiliate link, I would get $1.80 of that. That kind of money that I generate, which I'm telling you, I think I made $17 or $13 last year total. But that kind of money, any contributions that you want to send my way, if it's like $5 or whatever, helps me to pay for new speakers like this, like the Mika that I mentioned previously, and you know, just keeps the site going, and also honestly, it just helps keep me motivated to know that people do care, people are finding these kind of things interesting and useful, and it keeps me, you know, wanting to do these reviews, because it takes a long time to type up the reviews, to do these videos. I enjoy the science aspect of it, but it's also easy to feel wore out, and receiving the positive feedback that I've been getting a lot lately is really, you know, helped me stay motivated to stay on top of this and continue to do what I'm doing. So again, I really appreciate everybody listening or watching. I appreciate, you know, you reading my reviews and all that, and I'll see you in the next one, hopefully really soon. Bye. I also forgot to mention that Rosie gives this speaker how many paws up? Four paws up.
Bye.